From Minneapolis, Minnesota, welcome to Playwright Center's Theater Begins Here.
Welcome to Theater Begins Here, a podcast for our Playwright Center members by the small but mighty team that supports you. I am Joyce, Director of Membership Programs, and this is
Alayna, Jacqueline, Membership Programs Manager. And as Hannah said, we are the membership team that supports our 2,400 plus playwright members around the world. So I'm going to start off today just doing quick updates and announcements. We have an online seminar, How to Begin, taught by one of our core writers, Steph Del Rosso, on Monday, November 7th. The next week, we have an online seminar called Queering the Page Teaser, taught by affiliated writer C. Meeker, and that is on Monday, November 14th. I also want to make mention, as we talked about in our first episode, that this is a teaser seminar, and these teasers are just little sneak peeks into the semester-length courses available through our university course program in partnership with Augsburg University. If you have any questions about that program, feel free to reach out to the director of university course programs, Zoe Rodine. Finally, at the end of November, we have an online seminar called Oral History in Our Plays, taught by core writer Reedy Sachdeva, and that will be on Monday, November 21st. All of those seminar sessions are from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central Time, so please make sure to look at your time zone so that you know the proper time to join. And as a reminder, members, you have a discount for all seminars and classes. If you have any questions about our education season, please make sure to reach out to me and I will make sure that you are pointed in the right direction. Also, it's towards the end of the month, so the end of our October script club is happening, and we will be starting November, which is coming up pretty soon, and we'll have about 3 or 4 new plays to share with you. Just remember that each month you need to opt into being a reader and to share feedback. Those signups will be available to you shortly. And if you've already submitted a script and you weren't chosen this month, don't worry, you don't need to reapply unless you have an updated draft of that script that you would prefer to share instead, or a new script entirely. Again, if you have questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me or Hannah on our membership team. All right, Hannah.
Well, today we are speaking with one of my favorite people in the world, Stacey Rose, about starting a life in theater at, I'm going to put air quotes, later point in life.
Thank you there, darling.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about Stacey before we start our conversation. Stacey is a Charlotte-based, award-winning, nationally produced playwright. Her work celebrates and explores Blackness, Black identity, body politics, and the dilemma of life as the other. Stacey has held fellowships and residencies with the Arts and Science Council, the Dramatists Guild, the Playwright Center, Sundance Theater Lab, the Goodman Theater, the Civilians, and Tofty Lake Center. Her work has been presented at the Fire This Time Festival, the Lark, the Amoralist Theater Company, Rattlestick Playwrights Theater, City Rep, National Black Theater, Pillsbury House Theater, Barrington Stage Company, and Kansas City Rep. Stacey's plays, America v. 2.1, As Is, and Legacyland were featured on the Kilroy's list. Stacey is a recipient of the 2019 Virginia B. Toolman Foundation Women's Commissioning Grant in partnership with Rattlestick Playwrights Theater, and an Alfred P. Sloan Foundation Commission in partnership with Manhattan Theater Club. She currently writes for 911 on Fox, and Stacey, along with director Martin Damian Wilkins, are the co-founders of the Queen City New Play Initiative to support local and Southern playwrights in the creation of new work for the stage. And may I say, to the last point, I am in Charlotte this week, as Stacey mentioned. At this moment, with Stacey in support of this incredible Queen City New Play initiative. And we've been meeting with artistic directors around the city to talk about new play development and the importance of new and relevant stories on our stages. So let's see. I want to tell you quickly about this, and maybe we can ask Stacey more questions about it later. But the Queen City New Play Initiative is a commission opportunity for new plays that center a marginalized experience in North Carolina by playwrights in North Carolina who identify as part of a marginalized background. Selected playwrights receive $7,000 each, which is amazing, and the plays will be presented as a reading during a festival in June 2023. And by the way, the deadline is Halloween, the 31st of this month. So if you are eligible to apply, we encourage you to do so. And if you miss this year's opportunity, check back early next fall for the new round. And we have it listed on our Playwright Center opportunities board, so you can see it there. But I also encourage you to go to facebook.com/queencitynewplays.com. Welcome, Stacey Rose. Thank you for joining us.
Hi there, everybody.
We're so happy to have
I
you.
miss it. It feels a little bit like I'm in Minnesota right now, just a little bit. Yeah, I miss it.
We miss you. I'm glad to be here with you.
Even the cold. I'm glad you're here too. And I think your trip here for some reason is making this organization feel a little more real to me. I'm like, oh, we're like a thing.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, like we're actually, I don't know. Sometimes I move through and life, as you'll, find out over the course of today's talk, kind of just drags me along. And I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what I'm doing now. All right, great. Okay. I'm an artistic director. Cool.
That happened. This is real.
Well, I think it all comes out of just kind of, and I was talking to my mom about this before we got on, of just this desire to do something more and help folks kind of realize the dreams that I've realized. And even if they don't look the same, just to help them set them on a road towards that. And I know that I am not an anomaly, and I know that there is a great amount of talent here in the city. And people oftentimes just have to be given permission. And that's a lot of my story, is that people just gave me permission, which really ultimately was me giving myself permission to call myself a thing or to claim to be a thing. Because it took a very long time before I even accepted that I was a writer. Like it took an unnecessarily long time for me to embrace the fact that I was a writer. And some people think that being a writer means you've published X, or your work has been seen Y. But honestly, like the only thing it takes to be a writer is the commitment to get up and do so. That's really it. And no one else can dictate that for you.
Before you said I'm a writer, what were you saying you were then before?
Oh, I was like really, so I was a poet.
Love it.
I was a poet, which is also a writer.
Mm-hmm.
But I began writing not by accident, because I did a lot of it when I was a kid. And I kind of just, I journaled a lot as a kid. I wrote like short stories and things like that. But it wasn't ever anything that I was like, oh, I want to do this with my life. Like, this is the thing. It was never that. It was more so this thing that I always came back to, because it always made me feel grounded and whole and safe. So at the time when I was divorcing, this was around 2006, I needed to feel like my feet were on the ground. And so I decided to go back to school. So I don't know if you know this, but I was going to be a novelist, actually. I was gonna go to UNC Charlotte's English department, and had like already kind of looked at my classes, talked to an advisor, and then this odd thing happened. My advisor just died. My advisor died.
My God.
And so
I'm like trying not to laugh at it.
But it's like, that's how jarring it was. I was like, I just talked to, oh, okay. So I was like kind of really shook about it. And I was at the time taking classes. I was taking acting classes and creative writing classes at CPCC, our big community college here. And Tom Hollis, who is kind of the head of theater over there, or was. Tom retired recently, but Tom was like, why don't you just do theater? And I was just like, okay, but what am I gonna do in theater? Because it's just like, at the time I was 30, still fat, was fat then. And I was like, what am I gonna do in that department? And he's like, well, you'll figure it out. You're talented in a lot of different ways. You'll figure it out. So went to the theater department there and had to take a requisite playwriting class. And it was kind of then that I figured out that was kind of the thing. But even after that, it took a long while to believe that I was a playwright. What really kind of was the first kind of couple baby steps in that direction was like a lot of things kind of culminated or came together at the same time. So I was graduating UNC Charlotte and I was doing a thesis project for that. It was a directing project, but yeah, I was doing that project. And then around that time, I remember, and I can't remember where I got this bit of advice, but it was like, apply for things. Cause I can't remember where I heard that first. So I go and I'm like signing up for all these different, and I think Playwright Center was one, like I was like on these different things. And I had submitted, so Ashland 24-hour play festival, which is in Oregon, me not thinking. So they're like, oh, submit like a couple, like submit here's a prompt, write like a short piece on it and send it. And you can win like being part of this festival. And it was literally the first opportunity that I won. And what was shocking to them was, one, I was in North Carolina and they were like, well, this is typically for local people. I know it didn't say it, but they basically ended up accommodating I don't know whether we split the price anyway, they made a way for me to come out there.
That's amazing.
Which was right. Cause I was out there to write like one play. And it just dropped me in the zeitgeist of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. Like that was the first kind of thing I was part of. And at the time, not knowing how enormous this thing was that I was part of, because I was like telling my professors, like, yeah, I got into this thing. They're like, you got into what? Like, yeah, I'm going to Oregon. And so I went to Oregon, and that was like the first time that I had been surrounded by folks who were all like in a life of theater, and it felt great. And I was like, oh, I want more of this. So I decided to kind of jump in the pool a little bit deeper. I did a lot of producing work here in Charlotte. Again, not really expecting or really not claiming one thing, because I had this thing stuck in my head that you had to have this done, that done, or X done in order to kind of consider yourself a writer. And I think the time that I finally did allow myself, even though I had written a good bit before then and produced a lot and had a piece of mine be the first student piece to ever be produced at UNC Charlotte, student written and student directed and led and all of that at UNC Charlotte, I still even then was like, nah, I wrote a thing, whatever. But getting into NYU was like around the time, like, well, this is a lot of money, so I must be. But it's like, but it was like, but it really did take all of those little things and those little clusters of things. So it really just depends. Like what I would say is, don't trade places with what I've been through. Just go ahead and call yourself a writer and save yourself the $50,000 a semester. Just go ahead and say it. You can do it. Trust me, you can. There are people who make a lot of money and boy, they cannot write. So just like know that you're a writer if you say you're a writer. Like who invests time in debunking people's ability to write,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about, and we talk about it all the time, of like, there's no ladder or pathway
Mhm.
to go about anything. It's unique to each person.
For sure.
But do you think that there's certain things that all writers do need to go through?
Honestly, any applications. And I know this sounds
Say it again. Say it again for the
no, but
people in the back.
applications. And Hannah and I were talking about that this week. Applying for things has really forced me to understand my artistic vision, because the questions that applications ask require me to kind of be introspective and look and think about what it is that I am trying to say, trying to do, whether I'm, applying for an opportunity for a particular project or applying for an opportunity that's a fellowship that's much more introspective and asks of you, who are you as an artist, and et cetera. I like applications are low key I think even honestly, depending on which graduate, I've learned much more from applications, and I can say this firmly, and anybody can get mad with me if they want to, than I learned from grad school. I've learned much more from having to apply for things about navigating the nuts and bolts of a professional life in writing, from applying to things and interviewing for things and having to prepare for things. Those are the things that have prepared me for the nuts and bolts of a day-to-day career in writing, much more than any of my education has, being honest. And to today's topic, I think coming in as an older artist, I went to grad school. I kind of count that the beginning of my career proper, when I was 37. And at the time I had a 14-year-old going into high school. And it was the biggest controversy with some of my friends, like, how dare you leave your child and all of this stuff to go off to grad school. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not going to pluck a young man who's been in this school since he was in the 6th grade out of that school to go to New York and spend a lot of time alone while I'm in school, just to say I'm a good mother. You know what I mean? So sometimes when you are pursuing this thing, specifically when you're pursuing it later in life, you have a lot of people surrounding you with the shoulds. You should be, you shouldn't be, and it's bullshit. It's just what is good for you? What is good for your family? And that is no one else's business. And so for me, what felt right and what I was supported through by my mom and my village is just go off and do the thing. We're going to make sure he's okay. And they did. And
That's
they did.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
You have produced a lot of your own work.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to hear how you came to the point where you decided, I'm going to produce this piece of work.
Yeah, because I was in love and am in love with my plays, and it's not an arrogant thing to say. I know what it took to write each and every one of them, and to have to wait for someone else to say, yes, this is good enough to exist in the world, which is essentially what you're doing when you're waiting for a production, really robs you of a lot of the joy of your work, right? Because it just lives on the page. You know what I mean? Plays were meant to be performed. And so the danger, which I heard, which I ended up, that was the big, I've produced a lot of stuff of my own, but the danger was the biggest undertaking. And that I did a whole ASC supported workshop here of it. And then learning what I learned from that process, took it on to produce it in New York, where it sold out every single night. And even the venue who hosted it was like, can we do another week? And I'm like, can you pay my folks for another week? Because I don't have it. But yeah, it just became Here Comes the Sun right on time. I'm telling you, Hannah, that's how this city works. Our weather is set on a timer. But it's it was this undertaking of love, and I had a really good partner in Tiffany Nicole Green as the director, and a great partner in Jack in Brooklyn, who which at the time was was the artistic director of it, was Alec Duffy, and he essentially gave us the keys and got out of our way and didn't see a need to dictate. But seeing it's producing your work involves though your ability to take off your writer hat and put on your producer hat at some, like there's a point in the process where you no longer can be the writer and you are 100% the producer. And not everybody is that person. I have an ability to kind of just let go of the text at a certain point and focus on putting it how it comes together and supporting the team and helping it come together. And it was just for me worth any and all of the aggravation I had to go through, because it was me validating me. It was me validating my work. And I know sometimes that feels like it's not real unless so and so stamps it, but the real, y'all are gonna get the real shit for me today, but the real thing of it is, right, the people running the organizations where you want your work are people. They are not always right. They do not always see your vision. They have been put in position to be tastemakers and things like that, but they don't always have taste, especially when it comes to the work of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. They will pick what makes them comfortable oftentimes. They will pick what doesn't challenge them. They will pick what affirms a narrative that they understand. And it's not always malicious. And so am I going to navigate a sea of sharks and barracudas with the hope that, you know, I can just get through and crack through and breathe that one? Or am I going to just look at my work and go, fuck, this is good. I want to share this with other people. And that's a decision you have to make. Are you going to sit with a folder full of plays that are unproduced because, you know, New York Theater Workshop doesn't want to produce it, or Soho Rep doesn't want, like, are you going to really sit there with all of those brain children that you did not write those plays for those theaters? You wrote those plays for whatever reasons you wrote them. And they exist in the world. They go on to be produced at these, you know, grand institutions. Amen. Hallelujah. Right. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of Pulitzer Prize winning plays that are sitting in people's folders that have as much meaning and as much depth as a Sanctuary City. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just sort of like, and that is no knock to other playwrights who've been accomplished, but that is a very specific thing. That is a very specific, and I'm going to say it, New York thing. So it's just sort of like all of the playwrights, if you really zoom out and think about it, that are like highly accomplished in that world of things, they're all kind of New York, they're all in that New York orbit. That means something. Zoom out and see what your work actually means to you wherever you are in the world. Because New York does not set the tone for anything but New York. And I love a ton of people and a ton of playwrights and a ton of theaters in New York, but God bless them, they don't have all the answers. And so that's kind of also why I do the work I do, because there are other ways for folks to exist and be playwrights and be happy and thriving in the world outside of chasing opportunities. You know what I mean? If the opportunity isn't growing you as an artist, why are you going after it? If that's the question I ask. That's why I don't apply. I like honestly don't apply for much unless it's a grant to help me like build out my like organization. I don't apply for much, but because it's just like, one, I don't have the bandwidth. Two, it's like I'm very intentional about, I do apply for some things, but I'm very intentional about what it means for me at this point in my career. How is me applying for this thing making it harder for someone else who needs it more to get it? Because I also think in that way. So it's just sort of like, do I need to be putting my name in this pool where it's going to be standout when people who really need this opportunity more than I do? That right there always sits with me all the time. It's like, make room. There is room for everyone. And so when I have like applied for and had something, like I didn't apply for any of my Playwright Center stuff more than once because somebody else needs those opportunities, you know, even though y'all graciously allow people to like reapply, but it's like other people need those chances. I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
We like when you talk. You say good things when you talk.
I try.
Mm-hmm.
So again, knowing that you didn't go a traditional path, that meant you had some obstacles that were really unique to you. Do you mind talking about some of those and particularly how you navigated?
Sure. So again, going to grad school, specifically when I had a 14-year-old going into high school, had its own challenges in that I had to parent from a distance, and it made it that was probably the most challenging part, is like not being here for the big parent things like prom and all of that. Like I wasn't here, and that was like devastating for me.
Mm.
I think also coming into this thing later, I felt like there wasn't much expected of me until I began to achieve. And then it was just like, it took a while for people to believe that I had a valid stake in being where I was, which is not the first, like I thrive on being doubted. So, so that was, I love to be written off. Completely love it. So there was that. It was also the balance of work, because I had grown-up bills going into grad school, and I dissolved a 401k and a pension that I had. So I really did roll the dice. I don't know if I would recommend that. I would recommend folks make more calculated risk. I think the Lord really does look out for babies and fools, and so it has paid off. But like, if I had it to do over, I'd be like, how could I do this without spending like this pension that I had, or this 401k money that I had, in order to get it done. So calculated risk is a thing. But it paid off for me. But that was the hardest part, was like, once, because when I was in grad school, student loans, I was fortunate enough to receive a couple scholarships that helped to cover just day-to-day living, quite honestly. But those 2 years of not working were a challenge, and really something nobody in general talks about artists and money very well, or a lot. Like, I know y'all host workshops. I remember RIP to the Lark, they hosted a lot of really good workshops around money and being an artist, and Dramatists Guild does that around the money and being an artist thing. And yeah, I just have never believed in being a starving artist, so I've always balanced work and writing, and sometimes that's harder than others. And like, now writing is work. So it's like I'm balancing writing and writing, which is interesting. But yeah, I just think you just kind of cross each bridge as you get to it. Really do, like, especially if you're looking to go to grad school route, do deep dives and research in terms of like what money is available to you scholarship wise. Like, really make the calculated risk, but I will say the risk is worth it.
You are talking about this really difficult balance of having a life and bills and family. You worked as a respiratory therapist for years, and you were playwriting. And my sense of you,
even when I was at the Playwright Center,
yes,
I always had, like, I was between working, and then like and this was like literally my rotation. I would work, and then between my stipend disbursements, like, I'd take a chunk of time off when the stipend first hit, and then I would go back to working. So yeah.
What would you tell people? So I feel like this is a little bit basic. I don't think this is totally true, but if we consider that maybe people fall into two categories. One is, I want to be a writer. Eventually, I want to get to a place where writing can support my life, which is, where you are right now. Can you talk about like the balance and how you move into that space? But then for other folks who are like, I love my job, or I am committed to this life that I have with my family and my job, but I also want to be a writer. Do you have advice for those two kinds of?
I think I have one piece of advice. Well, I have a couple pieces of advice, but one piece of advice that I have for both is make time for your writing ritual. Make time to write. And I say that to you as I say it to myself, because that is important. And it doesn't have to be an excessive amount of time a day, but make time for it. right? And for the people who like love their jobs and want, like, honestly, I kind of wished I was a person who were like, I love my job, but I just want to write leisurely, because there's a lack of pressure that comes with that, right? Writing under pressure for a deadline for a television show is terrifying. It just is. But it's very well, you make a lot of money, but it's terrifying. So yeah, if you just enjoy, right, just find, like, make boundaries around your writing time. I say that to both sets of folks. The folks who are aspiring to write as a career, be very calculated, be very specific, know what you want to do, research the road it takes to get there, and slowly but surely start working in that direction. And what happened for me is that opportunities like the Playwright Center, like the one that QCMPI are offering, that gives you a chunk of money to work on a thing. Look for those opportunities that create space between work and, like, allows you to take space with work. Have a conversation. It's like, I pray you have a cool boss. Because I had a cool boss. Have the conversation with your boss going, look, I'm looking to transition. This is how I want to do it. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to give it 110% every single day. But I just want you to know there may come a time where I have an opportunity and I have to dip off for 2 weeks. And so, like, I will try to let you know about that. Like, if you can have those conversations with your boss, fine. If you can't, also fine. Just work around your vacation time. Like, when you apply for opportunities, just like be very creative with that. And what I did, if there's a way that what you can do what you do as a temp, and you get to a point where you're okay with insurance and you just need those working hours to kind of pay the day to day. I found a temp when I was working as respiratory therapy. There was a temp agency in Minneapolis called CORE. And CORE allowed me to pick up shifts as I wanted or didn't want. So I would have 4 to 5 weeks where I was working consistently, and then I would take off like 3 or 4 weeks. So find something or start gravitating toward or looking for something that's going to give you a little bit more flexibility in your schedule. So that's the kind of the slow transition, right? Is that you go from, building up your repertoire, knowing exactly what it is you want to do, knowing exactly what it takes to get there, and then finding those gaps of time, that allow for you to take time off work and focus on the writing and all of that. And then as that progresses, because opportunities create more opportunities, right? So as those opportunities are growing and flourishing, and it looks like work is kind of what it felt like more for me. And it ended up being a hard stop for me, because I was working up until I got into grad school. And when I left to grad school, I stopped working altogether for 2 years. I tried to work some within that 2 years. It was maddening. I could not do it. So I just left it alone. But like Minneapolis, like I said, that it created that opportunity where there was more space between work, and then there was more writing work. And eventually what ended up happening to me is that there began to be more writing work, enough writing work to support me, that I could just work in chunks. So like I would take like 8 or 13 week contracts or something like that, and work those contracts, and then come back to writing and come back to a focus on writing. So it's a slowly but surely. Be patient with yourself, be patient with your loved ones, because it becomes all consuming. And so also remember to show up for yourself in the middle of all this, self-care stuff, walks, water, body moving, that kind of thing.
I really love how, I'm just like underlining this again, how you were talking about how like you have to do the research. Like, it's not just writing, because it's really cool if you wrote the play and it's on your computer, and like, congratulations for writing the end, because that's hard to do. But filling out the application to know how you talk about yourself as a writer, and just going through the process, researching where your play should go, and also your path, I think is really important.
Very much so.
That's also the boring part, which people don't like to do.
That's actually the easiest part. The hardest part for me is gluing my ass down to a seat to write. write, quite honestly. I enjoy the research. I personally, you have to make it enjoyable. Like, put on music. You are setting up your life. That's exciting to me. Like, that's the part right there that I'm just like, I get to see where this play could go. I get to, I get to apply for these things. And I think about playwrights I know, like Adrienne Dawes. Like, so me and Adrienne were once upon a time in a galaxy far, far away on Grad Cafe. And I don't know if anybody remembers Grad Cafe, but Grad Cafe, when we were applying for grad school and all of us were getting the no, this is how me and Adrienne met in about 2011 or something like that. And we would all pop on and talk about the applications and da 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 da. And I finally got into grad school. Adrienne didn't. It took her, but Adrienne kept producing her plays, putting them out everywhere, doing the research. Mama had charts, all kind of like, just great, right? Like, obsessed with the way that she really stayed consistent, ended up doing fellowships, ended up in grad school, and now she's writing for like an Apple show. So it's just like, because it's there's not only one way, and grad school isn't the way for everyone. Adrienne's way was like self-producing and just getting her work into as many hands as possible. So there's always these different ways, but like seeing her and her path really kind of would gas me up. Like, she would show me these charts. I'm like, Adrienne, she would like, this is how much money I've won. This is how many times I've been rejected. This is like, she just is so chipper about it. She's just like, yep, this. She has the best sense of humor about it. And I think that's what you do, is you just kind of embrace the journey. Every life, like, my thing is, this writing is my passion. I refuse to let this be boring and work. Every part of it is exciting to me.
That's awesome.
I love that too.
Are there ever the times where, like, past you, where you still weren't thinking about calling yourself a writer, but like you're on the teeter of like, do I call myself a writer or not? What would you tell that person or talk to that person? How do you like hype them up about this?
Look around you. Who else do you know that's doing what you're doing? Who else do you know who is able? Expressing yourself with words is not easy. Look around you, girl. Ain't nobody doing it. Also, even if they are, they're not doing it like you. What you have to say is important. Who you show up as while you say it is important, because I feel like I'm just silently trailblazing, being a fat Black woman in the spaces that I'm in. Like, I gotta do it. Like, I have to do it. I love story too much not to. And so for me, that person, I would just keep going. Just keep going. And when it stops feeling good, stop. But I guarantee you won't stop. Even when it's rough, you don't. Yeah.
I love that Stacey Rose has got your back bigger than anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
What you say about, I think one of the through lines I hear through this whole thing is that you believe in yourself, that you are excited by the work you're doing. Mm-hmm. You see your place in the world, in your community, in the field. And, I want to do that. It inspires me to do that for myself, because as you said before, I think we all are looking for, it's on some level outside validation. And if we stop looking for that, because we're lucky if it comes, but what you're doing is so much more powerful, is you're pushing yourself forward, and you always have yourself.
Yeah. It has been a journey, and I get tired, but when I get tired, I rest.
Yes.
And yeah. There's this Karen Wheeler song called Don't Quit. And it is everything you think a song called Don't Quit. Well, hold on. I need to pull up the lyrics because they're really good. But I listened to that song a lot. Here it is right here. Sorry, but it's such a beautiful song. Okay. All right. Success is failure turned inside out, the silver tint on the clouds of doubt. But you never can tell how close you are, and maybe near when it seems so far. Got to stick to the fight when your heart is hit. And when things go wrong, you must not quit.
Yes.
I listened to that song a good bit.
Yes.
It's such a good song. Yep. I have a playlist. The thing, and another thing that file this under things that keep you going. Playlists. I have a Believe in Yourself playlist. I have a It's Gonna Be Okay. Those are for the rejection season playlist. Also, y'all need to know Adrienne Dawes if you don't know her, because Adrienne really does have a playlist for every thing, and she's also a playwright that we've supported through QCNPI. She is a Texas-based playwright, so our mission supports artists, playwrights from the South specifically, with an eye on shifting the narrative of what it means to be Southern. And man, does Adrienne challenge that narrative. She is from a large adopted family, grew up with a lot of disabled siblings, you name it. And she grew up in Austin, so she is sufficiently weird. So it's like, it's beautiful, right? To be able to kind of support and lift up that type of writer who you don't typically think of as Southern. And that's the thing that makes me happy. And I talk about her because her walk is such a beautiful one, in that, like, her attitude about when things are not going right and you're like, I can keep going, but I have to wallow. Like, my formula is I have to wallow for a solid 24 hours. And I give myself a solid 24 hours to be utterly miserable and insufferable and eat greasy pizza and just like grab my cat for unsolicited hugs and snuggles and cry, and she pokes me in my eyes when I do that. But some people can be really chipper around kind of things not going well, and she stayed persistent, and I have too. And think about it, that was 2011 when we met, and look at where we both are now. Very different paths, but have just kept pushing.
It's amazing. Thank you for sharing all of this. I want to be mindful of our time, so I feel like we should move over to some questions that have been submitted. And then for folks who are joining us live, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll ask them as well.
Yeah. Just kind of looking back at our submitted questions, one of the big ones that came up, several people asked the same question, so I'm just shoving these all together, is, do you feel like there's ageism in the theater, particularly in playwriting? Do you think that they're likely to disqualify, and I'm going to put in quotes, elderly writer or an older writer?
Let me go get my tea. I'll answer this question. No, I think there's ageism, sexism, racism. There's a big pot of isms in the theater. And I think, and I don't mean to I'm not trying to be dismissive when I say this, is that we all have to navigate whatever ism they're going to find for us with grace and dignity. I think you go where you are loved and received. You don't want to fight to be in a space that is full of an ism that pertains to you, period, point blank, whatever it is. I think that there are folks who are open to older writers, or writers who got their start late. And the one thing that older writers have over just youth is experience. And I think a lot of older writers come with that experience and lend it to the work, and the work in it is outstanding because of it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think there is plus or minuses to it. But I think it's navigable, just like the same way, Black folks navigate the ism in theater, the unspoken ism of racism that often happens in theater. You just have to go through and push through and go where you're affirmed. And if you feel like you have to contort yourself into knots to be affirmed, then that's not the space for you, and I wouldn't advise it. But there are also people who are very open and actually prefer writers who are more seasoned, specifically in television. Quite honestly, television, it has its ageism. However, it's like the experience that an older writer carries compared to younger folks can really set you apart and get you a job quicker than you might believe. Like, having a 22-year career under my belt really has served me well in navigating theater. One, we come to it with this, with all the tools the business often wants you to pay dues, but when you come to this business as an older writer, you have already paid a certain set of dues and understand a certain thing. Like, you don't need to become a writer's assistant to learn how to work with people at that point, as you would if you were 20 something, but you come there as a conduit. You're going to be the best damn writer's assistant ever because you are older and you are more responsible and all those things. And you're going to go through that as a conduit to the job, more so than I need to learn how to work. Like, that's not your story. And that's going to benefit you, I think, on the whole, when coming to certain writing situations.
I'm going to ask a question that was submitted by one of our live attendees.
Mm-hmm.
How did you figure out the budget you needed to produce your play?
Oh, that's such a good question. So sit and literally make a list of everything you think you're going to need, how many actors you're going to need, what it's going to cost to rent the space. Are you going to need a dramaturg? Are you going to need any type of like dance or whatever? So sit down and break all of those things out, and then think about how much you can reasonably pay people. I try not to pay people less than $15 an hour. That's just minimum wage, right? So if you're thinking in terms of minimum wage, then there's that. But there's also a world in which I've got friends who just want to do this thing with me. That's even better, right? So that's kind of in kind. So I would also still list that as like $15 per hour in kind from that person on your budget, for example. So yeah, so I would say think about every single thing that you need, from space to rehearsal space. Like, really try to exhaust your mind of the things you think you're going to need for how long the run is, how many actors you need, how many hours do you need them for rehearsal. Do all of that calculation, and then start with that $15 an hour base. Even if it ends up being over your budget, you see how it would look, and then you start thinking about ways to carve off that budget. And one person serve two roles? Can I wouldn't advise adjusting the play for that. Like, oh, we can double. Like, if that's not how you wrote it, don't go back and rewrite a play for a budget. Leave the play, leave the actors, leave all of that. But like, everything else around it is things that you can start to whittle away at.
Yeah. And don't forget rehearsal space rental or performance space rental. And, outside of people, space and equipment is another big one.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question from our live folks? So this is from someone who says, I'm 66 years old, a recently retired high school teacher of LA theater from the Seattle area.
Mm-hmm.
My current play projects are historical settings in my hometown of St. Louis. Hey, St. Louis, that's where I'm from. Play number 1 focused on women's reproductive health in 1989. Play number 2 focused on 2 men, 1 Black and 1 white during the 1940s, just before and after World War II. Am I writing for myself, or is there an audience for past events written by an older playwright?
That question's in the chat, isn't it? Okay.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of multifaceted. So,
I mean, I think there's an audience for plays with a past event, period. It doesn't matter who wrote them. Are you talking from a place of concern about who you are writing those plays, meaning like who you are and how you identify as a person writing those plays? Because the age is not going to factor. It doesn't matter how old someone is writing about something. Different things like, race and ethnicity might matter a little bit more. But no, I don't see. I think there is an audience for that, for those kinds of plays, for sure, especially plays that deal with historical areas and things like that.
Yeah, there are a lot of different states, including Minnesota, that have a history theater or something.
For sure. Yeah, I would encourage you to continue writing that and continue writing in whatever makes you feel passionate, because it's the passion that you put behind it that's gonna, make the play.
Just to ask another question that was submitted, and I'm going to combine these two questions together, is do you think there are specific themes that are most appropriate to be a successful senior writer? And how do you keep your young voices current when it comes to like their vernacular, their awareness, sensitivity?
Okay. Ask the first part again, because I got the second part. Ask the first part again.
themes that you think are most appropriate and
You
would
can
be
write
most
about whatever, you
successful?
can write about whatever, literally whatever you're passionate about. There is no limit per age as to what you should be writing about. In terms of keeping into like tapped into what young people talk about, you can do that a couple ways. One, watch YA stuff, watch YA work on television and film. But also, I would highly advise having someone young read your work and talk with them about it. I have a 23-year-old son, so he keeps me together. Yeah.
They're really good at that, aren't they? Like
Yes.
shaming you into not
And
being
to the
a
point of it,
dork.
yes, absolutely. Try writing a play about rap music with a 23-year-old. That's gonna
Nobody's going to make you feel older
no
faster
one is going
or
to make
more
you
out
feel
of touch
faster.
than your own child. Yes.
Yeah.
And we had a follow-up question in the chat about resources for like breaking out a budget. I'll say just that the Playwright Center actually has in our toolkit, so it's pwcenter.org/playwriting-toolkit, an article that is a breakdown of each of the parts of producing. And I will grab that and put that in the chat as well. And I can share that in our chat when we post this live so that folks can utilize that resource. And that was actually, it's called a step-by-step guide to producing. And one of our other members, Anna Nicholas, is the one who shared this with us. She's done a lot of self-producing. So
Again, well worth it.
How would you, for people that are in more remote areas or don't necessarily have a real theater community, especially people that are stepping into it later, how would you encourage them to reach out to other playwrights and to build a community?
Stuff like the Playwright Center, quite honestly, New Play Exchange, because those are going to be the avenues for that. And then build that community, like find the 1 or 2 or 4 people in your community who also have that interest and have gatherings. Yep, that's the easiest way to do it. And then if you gather with, like, if you have a Facebook group and all of that, you can create situations where you're traveling to then be together in here and see the work.
Great. Do you want to talk about next session?
yes, I definitely do. So thanks to everybody who joined us live. So next time in November on the 30th, again at the same time, 12 p.m. Central Time. So check your time zone. We will be meeting with Lindy Rosario, who is dramaturg and director of fellowships at Playwright Center. And we will be asking Lindy to talk to us about what is a dramaturg. Are they a researcher, an analyst, a writing coach, a sensitivity reader, a historian or specialty expert, or all of the above? In our next episode of Theater Begins Here, we are going to demystify the role of a dramaturg. With help from our special guest, Lindy Rosario, we will discuss the different ways dramaturgs are used in theater, from workshops to productions, and why they're important to the new play development process and how that's different from producing, a well-known play. As always, we will respond to questions from the live audience and also those submitted in advance. So if you can't join us, feel free to submit questions in advance and you can hear the podcast later. And that podcast is for people who are interested in dramaturgy, don't know what a dramaturg is or why they might need one, want to work with one, are interested in different writing career paths, or just want to get to know Lindy and her experience with the creative process. Oh my goodness. Danny, we get to meet Danny. Oh, she is a sweetie.
I love that she posed. She knew exactly what to do, where the camera was and everything.
Say hello.
Hi, Danny.
She's a fussy baby.
Well, she's a cat.
Well, the final thing that we do at the end of all of our episodes, all 2 of them, what we do is we like to say where theater begins for us, kind of based on what we've been talking about. So, Stacey, you can go first or last.
I'm going to go last.
Oh, okay.
Curveball.
I mean, I can go.
Yeah.
I can say that for me, theater begins when you commit and you set those boundaries for yourself to be able to commit.
I love that. For me today, theater begins when it's meant to.
Oh, that was mysterious.
Yeah.
For me, theater begins when we are gathered.
Mm.
And it has been so fun gathering with you all here just this afternoon. It actually has kind of shifted my mood. I was really wanting to just eat pizza rolls and be in bed all day. But theater always reminds me that I want to show up. So, and Hannah, having you here in town has been, having you be somewhere I love outside of Minneapolis has been fantastic. So, yep, when we are gathered, it begins.
Yes, I love that. Thank you, Stacey. Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thanks for everybody who joined us live.
And thank you all for your questions. They were really great questions. Like, don't let things like age or like be like defeat your, like, that's you think about it, but you can't think about it. You just have to kind of create and decide what success looks like for you, period. No one has to validate your existence as a writer, but you ultimately. And that was my story, is that I was like Dorothy at the end of Wizard of Oz, where it was in there all along. It was in there all along, and you've been a writer all along.
I love that.
Yeah.
I want to change my answer to where theater begins, or just add on to it, which
absolutely.
On this conversation, listening to you talk, Stacey, I think theater begins when you make it.
Mm-hmm.
And as you're saying, when you validate yourself and you say this story is important, I'm going to tell it. Who better to tell it than me?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, until next time, thanks everybody.
Thank y'all. Go out there and write. Have a good time doing it.
Yes.
Bye.
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 Join us next time for a conversation with Lindy Rosario on Wednesday, November 30th at 12 p.m. Central Time.
Thanks for listening to Playwright Center's Theater Begins Here.